All right, so next in talking about systems, we're going to solve them actually. So this is what we needed to get to in order to continue to get ready for the SAT. All right, so this is simple stuff. We're going to talk about substitution, and then we're going to talk about elimination. All right, and then what happens when we combine equations, and the fact that you can combine equations. All right, so here's our first one. Systems of equations with substitution. When you substitute something, that means you are plugging in something for something else, right? If I'm gone, there's a substitute teacher who takes my place, correct? Right? When we substitute in math, we have something else that takes the place of a variable or another term in the equation. So in this case, we have two equations. We have this one with negative 4x plus 11, y equals 15, and x equals 2y. We're supposed to solve the system. That means we have to solve for two variables. In math, if you have to solve for two variables, how many equations do you need? Two, right? Which we have. If we had three variables to solve for, how many equations would we need? At least three, right? We could have more. But in this case, we have two. So we're going to use substitution. So this is what we're going to use here. We're going to say 2y is equal to x. That means wherever there is an x, we are now going to plug in 2y. Wherever we see an x up above. So now this equation up here becomes, I'm always going to use parentheses, just like this. Sometimes I have to distribute a number, so I'm going to use parentheses here. In this case, we don't have to distribute. We do have to multiply, though. Right? So this is the most important part. Wherever there was an x, I'm going to plug in a 2y. Now what does it say? It says negative 8y plus 11y equals 15. How many variables do we have now in this one equation? One. Now we can solve for that one variable, right? Because we substituted the x with a y. So if I combine these like terms now, it says 3 times y is 15. What's the y? 5. 3 times what is 15? Well, 5. So y is 5. Now we still haven't figured out x, but it's really simple. We use the other equation. So if we solve for x in this equation, if we solve for y in this equation, we should use the other equation to solve for x. So if this is y, if we look right here, it says 2 times y is equal to x, right? That means 2 times 5 is equal to x. So what's x? X is 10. That's substitution. That's the long and short of it. All right, let's go back. Let's try to find maybe one more. I'm going to let you guys try this one. Okay, ready? I'm going to pause this and you guys try it. Ready? All right, first step, we're going to substitute. This says that y is equal to this, right? So that means everywhere there's a y, I'm going to plug it in. So my new equation looks like this. Use parentheses, right? Use parentheses so that we can distribute when we need to. So if I distribute, it doesn't affect the first term only, it affects both terms. So this is now 7x minus 14. How do we solve such a thing? What do we have to do first? Combine them. Nice. That's 12x. And now we've got two steps to solve. We're going to do this first. So now it says 12x equals 72. Whoa. 12 times something, 72. What's the something? 6. Bingo. X is 6. Then we're going to use the first equation that we substituted in. We're going to plug that in. Sorry, by first I meant this one. Doesn't make any sense. If I plug 6 into there, because it's x, right? It says y equals negative 6 plus 2. So what's y? Negative 4. How can I check myself? Well, what I can do is I can plug both of these into that equation up here. I'm going to do that real quick. 5 times x, which is 6, minus 7 times negative 4. So that's 30 plus 28. Guess what? It matches the other side. So that way you know you're right. You know it. Right? You know it. You know you're right. Not just guessing. Right? We know we're right there. All right, that's substitution. Next assignment we're going to do. Combining equations. It says, what is the result of subtracting the second equation from the first equation? Notice the way it's said. What's the result of subtracting the second from the first? If I replace these with numbers real quick, if I say subtract 7 from 8, what's the answer if I subtract 7 from 8? It's positive 1, right? So when they phrase it like this, the order is backwards, right? It's backwards when you subtract. So what's the result of subtracting the second one from the first? That means I'm subtracting this whole thing from the first equation. Just like that. Now, it gets a little funky here because we're going to have some negatives that we're going to subtract and it turns into addition. So get organized, be careful here. If you subtract everything in here, you don't just subtract the first term, right? So what we're saying here is negative 7x minus 7x. Negative 7x minus 7x. Not 0, is it? No. It's negative 14x. Then the next part, it says negative y minus positive 8y. So what's negative y minus 8y? That's negative 9y. And if I subtract the numbers, 0 minus negative 6, that's your double negative. That turns into positive 6. That's the result of combining equations. Okay, you guys, try this next one. Ready? Go. All right, what's the result of adding these two? Just add them up, right? Doesn't matter really the order. The order in which you add doesn't matter. So we got 7x plus 2y equals negative 17. Easy peasy? Okay. Now, the last assignment we're going to do is elimination. Last thing I'm going to teach you today. It's exactly what we just did. It's a different method for solving systems. So again, this is something you should have learned in Algebra 1, but again, some of us were not privileged enough to get that instruction, right? It's a little pandemic that happened. Remember that? And a few other things for some of you sophomores. All right, so it says solve the system of equations. Use elimination. This is called elimination because of this. Try this. Tell me what happens when you add these two equations. Do that now. Ready? Go. What happens with the y's? What do you end up with? 7y. What happens with the x's? You get 0, so let's not write any of them, right? With the other side, you get negative 7 plus 14, 7. Right? Because we added the equations just like we combined them in the last assignment, now we can solve because it just so happened that these two were opposites. So 7 times something is 7. What's the something? 1. How can I solve for x now? Plug it in. It doesn't matter which equation you use in this case. You could use the first equation or the second equation. Let's just use the first one. Okay, so let's plug 1 into here. Then we'll have to use some algebra to solve. So 5 times 1 is 5. What's the next step to solve this? Tell me. Subtract 5, both sides. Awesome. Negative 4 times something is negative 12. What's the something? Positive 3. There it is, right? X is 3. How could you check your answer? Plug them both into the second one. I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to do that. But actually, I will real quick. What's 3 times 4? What's 1 times 2? So we got 2 plus 12. What is it? Oh, we're right. Okay, I'm going to assign these. We'll start working on them tomorrow at the beginning of class. But it would be wise of you, if you want to save some time, maybe do it at home. There's a word for that. What's it called? Homework. Welcome.